Well, hello and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. My name is Rehan Jalil. I'm the CEO for Security at It's a true pleasure for me to be talking to Rex Davis, who is the Chief Data Officer for RBC. Rex, welcome.
And thanks for having me. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rex, I think to get started, I think it may be great if you can maybe introduce yourself to the audience, and then we can, have some interesting discussion.
Very good. Well, I'll keep it as quick as possible. I'm Rex Davis. I'm the Enterprise Chief Data Officer for Royal Bank of Canada. I've been with RBC for 3 years, but before that, I was 14 plus years with dunnhumby, working across the world. Before that with Coles Myer, and I originally had a PhD in economics. So that's basically my background. I'm an Australian that's lived in 5 countries. So if my accent steers off a little bit, that helps explain it.
And you have such a diverse experience that you brought from different places, and now at the RBC. What are some of the areas that you're most passionate about your work? That'd be a good place to start.
I think I'm most passionate about finding value in data where people will not necessarily see it. So if I really tune in on it, I think I've spent a career looking and finding proxies or spots or things that have got lots of value, but people have either considered them exhaust or have considered them not to have as much value. So things that people will utilize, something that is very useful for one particular purpose might have more use for somebody else. And I'm very passionate about that. And of course, going with it is the tools and the techniques we use to derive value out of that data. But I'm very passionate, or most, if I think of things that really, really excite me, it's about finding spots in which there is a bit of data that is of a particular use in one spot and has much better use elsewhere.
And now I think we talk about data, and now all of a sudden, it's truly at the center of innovation, right? It's particularly with the natural language understanding and generative AI and all. Keeping some of that in mind, in your view, how would you say what are the top 3 predictions, particularly for this year as it ties to BI, AI, analytics, which aligns with your passion about data?
Yeah, so my first one is I'm going to expect that the regulatory eye on data is much more rigorous. I think that's going to be my first prediction. Is you're going to be hearing a lot about data and AI, but you're going to be hearing a lot about different forms of government, different government bodies looking at how data is being used, and a greater understanding of the public about how data is being used. Congress had a inquiry with all the major tech leads from social media companies, and it wasn't a walk in the park, right? It was lots of questions from both parties in the US asking particularly tough questions, and all of it with a framework and an underlying conversation around potential legislation and other parts. And I think you're going to see more and more conversations around the regulatory impact of that. That would be my very first one. Second one, of course, I mean, it's all going to be Gen AI, right? Like Gen AI, and you're going to start seeing some of the people that are able to move quick, and you're going to see some more and more. Particularly, you'll see more and more interactive examples of how that operates, which goes to my first prediction. My third one is probably going to be, I don't think it's going to be on everyone's list or everyone's bingo list if they're watching me and looking for my top 3. But I suspect a whole lot of things that have been on the shelf for a while are going to be started to be dusted off because Gen AI drives you to it. So let me give you an example. A whole lot of the old robotic process automation and that sort of stuff, the old BPM pizzas, where people have looked for years and gone, you know what, we really need to get better with this process, or we need to get better and more efficient with these activities. And no one's really done anything about it for a few years. Then all of a sudden the conversation turns to Gen AI, and then people are wanting to get a whole lot of these processes that they haven't touched for a while going quicker. So they're going to be my three. My one is, well, yeah, maybe put whatever order you want. Let's go Gen AI first because that's obvious. Then the regulatory I being far greater across all of data. And my third one being a number of things that have gone back in the past getting dusted off, probably because Gen AI tells you that you can do it. So you'll have a whole lot of things that people haven't talked about for a while, all of a sudden coming to the fore because it was a conversation that's been brought out through Gen AI.
That's awesome. So you have Gen AI, really shiny thing everyone wants to use, and frankly, very beneficial. But there's a tension between what can I do with it, with data, how do I actually govern the data? And the use cases somehow really become obvious, as I said there. The parts of the well put there. Now, keeping that in mind, I mean, there is some rapid innovation going on in the large language models, your own custom models, SLMs, and then, of course, regulatory. How are you thinking of preparing the organization, that large organization that you have, in terms of keep pace with the innovation on one hand, but also ensuring that certain data can be utilized? Because without data, you can't do much, right, with it, particularly unstructured data. Structured people have been doing for some time, but unstructured data. How are you thinking of preparing your organization for that?
So for my biggest thoughts around this come down to the enablement, or the ability for us to be able to put things into production, right? So I will have no shortage of people across the organization with useful use cases. And I've never found that all up, by the way. My entire career, no matter where I've been, I've always found, I've never been a person that's found that the business wouldn't know what to do with it. So if I go across RBC, all the different parts of it, I've got lots of really good business units telling me, this is something we can do with Gen AI tomorrow.
Yeah.
But that does lean us towards, well, you want to be doing more, you want to work out how you can get the processes or the approval processes in place to get it through quickly. If I'm doing my job well in RBC, I've created or helped assisted that platform, and particularly the flow of approval processes and other parts to ensure that we can get Gen AI operational. Now, back to your point, right? And one of the biggest things that comes back to it is how much we've got our data in a good place beforehand to utilize this activity, how cultured it is, how the level of quality, the understanding, its provenance, the whole paddock to plate, as I would call it, the process of understanding where it's all in, where we're getting it through, become more and more important. So the more work we've done in the back to get everything right, the more we've put into the care part of the equation, the better we are at the enablement side of it, the quicker we'll get to value. And that's probably my big mantra for the whole thing, is getting our care right, our data care right, will lead to our enablement, which will lead to value.
Well, on that high note, I'd really like to thank you, Rex, for joining us today. And this video will be available, and you can see that at CDO magazine. Thank you so much for taking time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.